I'm Rafael. I came from Ukraine, and this is Ukrainian national food.
You got one and a half?
Pilpel im basar.
Wow. Let's see.
It's перцы с мясом. Pilpel im basar. Перцы с мясом. Мясом.
Can you put it in half? Small one, not a big one.
Small, I don't think so.
Palestine.
Wow. Okay.
Uja.
It can eat with I don't know what's shemenet. Shemenet is that all. It tastes nice. So бета-авон.
Давай мы тебе положим.
Давайте мне положим. Ukraine, yeah. Давайте мне положим. תודה רבה.
לא, לוואי.
אולי אלוהים רוצה שנעשה משהו ביחד.
זה כמו גולש, זה פפריקה.
I think it's tasty.
רק בלי... רק בשר.
בeta-avon.
So let's go sit somewhere and we'll talk about what this place is, okay? Ever since 1933, basically, ever since 1933, when the Nazis gained power in Germany, and the rise of the Nazis to power will bring a chain of events that will mean distress for Jews, millions of Jews all around the world, especially in Europe, but not just. Okay, so Jews flee, they seek refuge. Other countries doesn't give them refuge. The British limit the amount of Jews that can immigrate to Israel. When this wave of immigration grows, also the Haganah, the largest resistance in the community here, recruits to the effort and establishes an organization which will be called the Institute for Immigration B, Aliyah Bet, that's right. And this organization will be the biggest organization that will try to bring those so-called illegal immigrants to Israel. Now the British, they find out that they have this phenomenon of Jewish illegal immigration, and they try to catch those people. And when they do, usually what they do with them is they put them in detention camps like the camp that we are in now. They had other camps in Israel, but this was the largest camp that they used in Israel to detain Jewish illegal immigrants. Later, after the war, this wave of immigration grows. The British also start to construct detention camps in Cyprus, and also there they detain tens of thousands of Jews.
Hey guys, I'm Christina. I'm from Ukraine, and I made this waffle cake, which isn't a fancy cake. It's made of waffle and condensed cream and some nuts. It's really good stuff. But what makes it special, in Ukraine, after World War II, it was really hard to get like basic ingredients, butter and condensed milk, where like if you found a can in August, you'd keep it for when you celebrate New Year. So even though it's made of like really simple ingredients, they were so hard to find. And that's why Ukrainians till today eat it as if it's a fancy cake. You guys are welcome to enjoy it.
Sounds kind of bomb.
It's a wonderful pleasure to be here with the Aliyah coordinator, project manager of the Aliyah Return Center, Christina. Many of you know her and love her. Now, she also made Aliyah and has an Aliyah story to tell. Would you share with us some of your journey of Aliyah?
Yes, it is true. Back in '95, my family came to Israel on a boat, on a ship, and I remember, since we were legal immigrants, so long after the land was established and the state of Israel was established, we were preparing for this day. We were waiting. We were dreaming about it. So, I'm coming from Ukraine, Kharkov, And back in Ukraine, it was not so popular to be a Jew. And we knew we were Jews, like since we were kids, but me personally, I didn't know what it meant. For a very long time, even as I came to the land, and it took me time to figure out my identity and who I was. But back then in Ukraine, we were not so welcomed. People were saying mean things and looking at us differently. I remember my grandfather would teach us Hebrew songs and Yiddish songs and some Hebrew words, and we were looking forward. There was some like anticipation to come to the land. We knew we were going, you know. And as the date of our Aliyah came near, I remember packing up everything, talking about Israel. There was so much excitement and passion about coming to the land. They were telling me about this beautiful, clean, happy, joyful place, you know, like the place we were supposed to be. And as we made Aliyah and we arrived here in the land, absorption process started. And so on one hand, we're finally home. We're finally where we're supposed to be. We were getting ready for that, and it was done. And that was amazing. I can remember we ported in Jaffa, and it was just a beautiful night. I can remember all the lights, and I can remember the volunteers that came out to greet us. Wow. And they took me, I was 8 years old, they took me and my younger sister on their shoulders. And those volunteers happened to be believers, and they were reading verses about the Jewish daughters coming and being brought to the land on the shoulders, you know? And
Isaiah 49, verse 22.
And so that was an amazing experience, and you know, very epic. But then once you arrive and life begins, that's when it hits you. I can remember a day, maybe after a week or two of us being in the land, I can remember a day when my entire family, we sat in my parents' bedroom that was just empty. There was just one bed. We didn't have anything. We didn't have the language. They didn't have jobs. They were going through Ulpan, Hebrew school. And we sat on this one bed that we had in the home, and we all cried. Just all started crying because we missed everything we had. You know, at least we had friends, at least we had a home, at least we had our life going on for us, and this was starting from scratch. So I think for me, really, as I'm working here at the Aliyah Return Center, it means so much to me to be part of helping those immigrants that come here and helping them with their absorption, helping with whatever we can and whatever we have, because I've been through this process, and I watched my parents who had to find a job, who had to find an apartment, they were taken advantage of, they were, you know, fooled and misused, and that's part of being a stranger. That's just, I think it's in every country you go, but they fought for us, and they worked all day long and all night long, and they just made it possible for me and my brothers and sisters to be here. And so that's so meaningful to me, to be able to reach out to those people in the need that we were part of, that we experienced ourselves. And just, you know, I think the ARC is doing an amazing thing, and I'm blessed, I'm honored to be a part of that. And you know, it's been, 26 years ago, and now that I feel like this is my home, that's my country, I know everything. I'm like, Hebrew is my mother tongue, I call it. Israel is, that's my country, that's my home, that's everything for me. And you know, I praise God, things are going good, and you feel like that's it, you've settled. But there are other people that are going through this process, and they're lacking very basic things sometimes. So, and I believe that this is very much in the heart of God to, for whoever can reach in any possible way to help and assist and bless and reach out to the needs of these people. So that's this day at Aliyah Museum, and that was just really touching and amazing.
I think when people ride off into the sunset, and you're right, there's like a romanticization of Israel, but when it really starts is when you realize, wait, I have to get a job, I have to learn the language, I have to integrate, I have to get attached, my heart has to get attached, I have to get the acculturization. and really it's called absorption. And I think that that's the part people don't realize exists, and that's a very important part. You probably know more than 50% of the people who make Aliyah can't seem to get settled and end up leaving, and that just breaks our heart. And it's not what Jeremiah said in Jeremiah 32 verse 41, I will plant them in the land God speaks with all of my heart and all of my soul, like a tree with roots. So that's what we're here to do, and you do a great job. God bless you, and thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you.
What I take from this raggedy boat is that it's condition, okay? Because many of the ships, some of them were at this side, the smaller ones. There were giant ones who carry 4,500, like the Exodus, or even bigger, who carry 7,500 people each. But there were also small ones like this. But most of them were in a similar shape to this ship. They didn't have many resources. The ships are usually very old, very poorly maintained. They have to stack a lot of people inside those ships, which means the conditions are very, very hard. There is barely supply. Typical ration of water, daily ration of water is around half a liter a day. There's nothing to talk about basic hygiene, such as shower or something like that. And the conditions are very hard, and they're making their way to Israel. If they are successful, most of them weren't. They get into Israel undetected, and then the members of the resistance, they gather in the shore, they get them out, they hide them in people's houses, and this way this ends up well. But in most cases, the British detect the ships, they board them already at sea. Sometimes the passengers, they try to fight back, but eventually, every time the British take over the ship, okay, it's the British Empire back then. Those are serious people, and their enemies are refugees from the Holocaust. Okay, so it's not kohot. So even if they take the ship, like, I don't know, 100 kilometers from the coast of Israel, they take the ship to the port in Haifa, and from there, by the train, you can see train cars similar to those that were used to bring people here. You can see those are not passengers cars, cattle cars. They are taking the people in a train like this to the camp, and then they are taken to this big barrack over here for disinfection. So let's get inside this barrack and see what happens to them when they arrive here. During those years, the people, after all they've been through, they are taken to Haifa, from there by the train to the camp, and then they are taken here. This big barrack is the welcome that they receive from the camp. Their clothes are taken to this big vat to be disinfected with steam. A procedure that doesn't clean the clothes, it just kills everything on them. The detainees themselves, they are sprayed with DDT. A DDT is an insecticide. People are coming from the Holocaust, and some of them do say that this is how they felt. They are taken from the Holocaust, they fled from the camps, and then soldiers take them off the ship by force into train cars that are very similar to the cars that the Nazis used. They get off the train, they see another camp, they see the fences, the watchtowers, the soldiers, the guards, the separation between the families. So there's a lot of similarities. The conditions here, the conditions here are hard, but you can't compare them to conditions in a labor camp or a concentration camp or a death camp. So there are a lot of perspectives to how to take the camp. Some people take it this way, some people take it the other way.
So, half of my family is from Hungary. This is why I made marha pörkölt. It's a stew from beef. It's not goulash, and it's a traditional Hungarian food. We can eat it with almost everything, every side dish. Here we have rice with it, and it's great. I love it.
Say something in Hungarian.
Jó étvágyat! Egészségünkre! It means bon appetit, May it be to our health.
Nice.
Can we see the dish a bit?
Yeah, here.
The story of the Bible, the story of the people of the Bible, the Jewish people, is really a story of a promise and then essentially, getting dispersed to all kinds of countries, and then forces came into play which brought the Jewish people back to the land. And so you were born in Israel, right? But your family...
My parents actually did Aliyah.
From where?
Yeah, so it's a very unusual mix. My mother is from Cuba,
Okay.
and my dad is from Budapest, from Hungary. And they did Aliyah in the 90s. And to see all the people who did Aliyah in the 40s, in the 50s, how hard it was for them,
Yeah.
it was incredible to see, because my parents did Aliyah through airplanes. It wasn't that hard for them, but to see what people had to go through in this museum, in this Sha'ar Aliyah, in this athlete detention place, it's incredible how much faith they had, how much hope they had, and how much mystery and cloudy was the situation, because they didn't know if they will make it. They didn't know when they stepped into the boats to come here to Israel, they were not sure if they would make it. And they were coming here to the athlete detention camp, and this is where actually their story doesn't end, but
Right.
begins.
That's right. Now, when did the penny drop, or when did it click in your mind, your own mind, that you are a part of some destiny written in the Bible, some plan of God, this Aliyah? When did you get the understanding that you're part of a biblical story?
We Jews, we are scattered all over the world, and sometimes we have a good life aboard, sometimes we don't, and there's something very special to be here, because to be in Israel is not only about having fun, it's not only about serving in the army
Having good coffee.
having good coffee, eating good hummus. It's not all about that. It's more. It's you have a biblical mandate
Yeah.
in this land.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. God didn't promise a land to the Finnish people, to the Americans, to the Brazilians. He promised the land to the Jews, and we are right here in the promised land.
Now, you work in communications at the Aliyah Return Center, and I know you're communicating with different nations who realize that they are part of actually this story, because God's called them, like in Isaiah 49, to carry the Jewish people, like it says in Isaiah 40, to bring comfort to the Jewish people, like it says throughout the Word of God, Isaiah 14, verse 1 and 2, about nations and people joining themselves to the house of Israel to really help them in this plan of God. How do you feel that response of the nations is to your communications?
It's very satisfying, and it's a huge blessing to see that more and more people realize that there's a prophecy that is being fulfilled right now. Because when we think about biblical prophecies, we think about 700 years before Christ, or we think about the second temple, the first temple, we think about the house of David. Those are real things that actually happened, but this is so far away from us. And now we could actually touch the boats, the fences, the camps.
Yeah.
We could touch the instruments that were actually taking part in this prophecy that is still happening.
Yes.
Even as we
Still
talk
today.
today, people are making Aliyah.
Yes.
People are fulfilling this prophecy.
Be part of the adventure, be part of what God's doing around the world and in Israel. Be part of the Aliyah Return Center. God bless you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Okay, so we're in a restored barrack. It really resembled how it looked like, although maybe it was more crowded. We have around 20 beds here. There actually used to be around 40, and sometimes up to 70 detainees in every barrack, so it was very crowded. Not everyone had his own suitcase, so this is why we see those sacks tied from the bins in the ceiling. So this was
For what? The rats?
this was it was also to keep their belongings from the rats who crawled on the floor, but also a way to store your belongings. If you don't have a suitcase or a bag or anything, you just find some kind of a sheet or a sack and you tie it up there. And in those kind of bags they lived. Here they had to pass the time until they will eventually meet their fate. Most of the people were, as I said, most of the people eventually got the certificate. So some were held here for months, some were held here for even a couple of weeks in certain cases. Most of them held here for months, sometimes even years. The longest stay here was around 2 years. So people basically mostly have to find a way to pass the time productively until they will be released. There are roll calls every morning and every evening. They have to stand in lines to be counted to see that no one is missing. But they held here the discipline. Okay, people that were misbehaved were treated with force. Okay, they had clubs, and if anyone did the wrong things, he got his punishment. People who tried to escape or tried to do stuff like that, if they were caught, they were taken to the Akko prison, which was way worse conditions. But apart from that, maybe the British made them volunteer to work in the camp, cleaning barracks, maintaining the kitchen and stuff like that. To boost morale, you can see the symbols of the youth movement. They were members of Bnei Akiva, which is a Zionist religious youth movement. But there were, for every political movement, they had their youth movement, which is Shomer Tzair, Beitar, Dror Abonim. There were all kinds of youth movements, and back then they had very important role because there were a lot of children in Europe. The war started when they were, let's say, 10. Now they are teenagers, left alone in the world. In the youth movement, they gather those young people, and they try to bring them to Israel, try to find a way to integrate them here into the new society that was built here in Israel. And they are gathered by those youth movements, and they are very proud to be members of this specific youth movement. So they live this symbol of their youth movement, which they are proud of. But the Calvinists have maybe a much more important purpose, and this is to leave some kind of a message. Because we are talking about people who leave Europe with no information what happened to their relatives. They were scattered, many of them taken by the Nazis. You have no idea where they went. Maybe they also tried to immigrate to Israel. Maybe they will also find themselves held here in the detention camp. And it's not only here, but it's obviously here it's very present. It was all around Israel back then. They leave some kind of a message that Yuda Schwartz from Cluj, I've made it. I've made it from the Holocaust. I've made it to Israel. I was held in Fleet. We can see here that this guy, for example, Shalom Yosef Engel, he basically tells us his story. I'm Shalom Yosef Engel. I came here with the Bnei Akiva. I'm from Kolodno, which is a town in Romania. Came by the ship Haganah, and we can see that after he made this carving with very detailed. It's like very nicely done. He added at this time with haste the date that he entered the camp, the date that he left the camp, and below that Pardes Chana. So Shalom Yosef trying to leave a message. If by any chance one of his relatives will come here, he will know what happened to him, and eventually he received the permit to leave the camp, the certificate to live in Israel, and he quickly leaves when he was here, where he was heading next. So there might be a chance that one of his relatives will see this, and they will have a way to find each other.
So this is Aliyah. It's Russian traditional salad, and there is not a single time when you celebrate New Year and having no Aliyah.
Я тебе влезла в кадр, делай опять.
Да влезай, пожалуйста.
Hi, my name is Chaim Mailspin. Chaim was always an interesting name living in America. Even Japheth Chaim Mailspin, very interesting. When I made my Aliyah to Israel, everyone's like, hey, Chaim is a totally cool name. So that was really awesome for me. I remember when I first came to Israel, I felt like a total tourist. I was literally going and taking like water out of the Jordan River like tourists do. I was going to the Dome of the Rock, and I'm like, well, the temple's gonna be built here again. And I took like a little dirt, took some stones, and I'm like, we're clearing this away. This is all very wrong to say publicly, but but what I love about America, because I'm an American-born man, I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. No, is beef jerky. It's so good. Find your wild side. I personally like Jack Link's. Also, anybody who loves baseball, I love baseball. I used to play in the Yankees when I was younger. And but I grew up in Israel, and I even played baseball in Israel. So I used to love chewing baseball. This is my favorite chew, which is Bubble Yum, original flavor. Of course, Jolly Ranchers, a couple flavors of Jolly Ranchers. It's a hard candy, and it's super delicious. So, hey, I'm proud to be an American, but I'm proud to be an Israeli, fulfilling the dream of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the dream of God, and that's called Aliyah. And I'm glad to have made my Aliyah. I'm glad to make my home in the sandy beaches of Israel, and to fulfill this dream of 700 prophecies. God bless you from the land of Israel.